Welcome back to Titletown Talk with your host, Jackson Tolliver. Thanks so much for joining in on this gorgeous Sunday afternoon. The weather is getting nicer here in Boston. Hopefully by my next episode, Thursday, the meteorologists are saying maybe 70 degrees. So spring is definitely coming. Baseball is definitely coming, but for now we have a lot to go over. Mac Jones was just traded this morning to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a late round pick. We'll dive into that. And free agency for the Patriots begins, or for the whole league rather, begins tomorrow. So we'll talk about that some more as we did last episode. The Celtics get a huge win last night, avoiding their first and only three-game losing streak of the season after they dropped a tough one to the Nuggets. We'll get into both of those games. The Bruins are rolling this week, really bounced back well. Didn't make huge moves at the deadline, brought in a couple smaller pieces that we'll talk about. Revolution dropped their opener, unfortunately. Not their opener. They dropped their third, which means that their opening record is 0-3 for the first time since 2001. So we will dive right into all of those things and more on Titletown Talk. Let's talk about the Celtics first and foremost. I think that last night may have been their biggest win of the season so far because there was a lot being said about this team. They have a bad record against the top teams in the Western Conference. So you go in on the road in Phoenix with Kevin Durant, with a solid team. I know they didn't have Booker, but the Celtics didn't have Porzingis, so it's still a disadvantage for Phoenix, but still able to win that one. We'll dive right into that, but let's start with the bad, right? Because we always go in chronological order, and on Thursday night, after I recorded the podcast, I came on here and said I expect the Celtics to bounce back, beat the Nuggets by a score of maybe 12, I think I said. Yeah, that was wrong. I had a little bit too much faith in the team and their ability to bounce back from that difficult loss they faced against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I had absolutely no confidence in the team when they were down, based off the flow of the play, based off what I've seen in other games when the Celtics have been down, which is very unfortunate for a team that is supposed to be at such a high level and such a high caliber squad that you don't really have faith that they can come back and win a game like that on the road. The Nuggets are just so good. You got to give them their flowers. But there is, for the Celtics, in my view, a clutch time problem when they're down. When they're up, they can usually squeak it out, as we saw last night. But when they're down, I feel like they, off the top of my head, I have trouble remembering like a clutch time, besides that Minnesota game in Boston, where they were down late and they rallied and came back. But Anthony Edwards might be one of the only stars in the NBA that's more inconsistent than Jason Tatum, to be honest, and he was awful that fourth quarter. So what I'm trying to say is I'm struggling, and I am concerned about the late game execution from Boston on both sides of the ball. I think it was a lot better last night, obviously, but we got lucky because the Celtics weren't making their shots, but neither were the Suns. So that was an anomaly there. Let's stick with the Nuggets for now. Jason Tatum, absolutely abysmal performance. 5 for 13, 15 points, and 5 turnovers, rather. Not good from him by any stretch of the imagination. Needs to step up, especially against, what a lot of people are thinking is the Celtics' main competition. This is a potential finals preview. Tatum needs to be there, stepping up, being more aggressive. I mean, only 5 made shots from your alpha on your team is not good enough in a nationally televised primetime big dog game. Really just a continuation, it felt like, from his awful second half against the Cleveland Cavaliers, where the Celtics let that one slip and lost to them on the road. So, really bad game and a half for him. I would say the first half of last night's game, he was also pretty bad as well. Started to kind of figure it out in the second half, but just 2 games total. Second half of Cavs, the entire Nuggets game, and the first half last night. Tatum has not looked himself. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if he's just in a funk or if, I couldn't even begin to diagnose what it is. So, awful game from him on Thursday night. He obviously missed the wide open catch and shoot 3-pointer to put the Celtics ahead in the final minutes of the game. Would have definitely changed the complexion. No excuse for your superstar player to not make that shot. Absolutely none. That was super disappointing. And the funny thing is that when it left his hand, I didn't have confidence it was going to go in because he was just having a bad game. So, I'm watching my friends, it releases from his hand, and I'm saying he's not going to make it. And, of course, he didn't. Nuggets win the game after some great play all around. Jaylen Brown, though, phenomenal game. 41 points. The problem is he just couldn't make his free throws. So if he had made his free throws, the Celtics would have won the game. But you can't fault him because he was the, single focal point of the Celtics offense that night. Besides Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday was also really good. Porzingis, was an average night for him. I expected him to do a little bit better than he did, but missed some shots he should have made, but he was fine. But Drew Holiday was phenomenal. He hit those 2 threes at the end of the game to keep the Celtics really in it and set up Jason Tatum for that potential game, potential shot that would put them in the lead. I was going to say game winning, but there was still time left on the clock. So Derek White wasn't great. His shooting from behind the arc has really taken a dip recently. I'm not quite sure why. There doesn't seem to be that much of an explanation for it. And the bench on Friday was non-existent. I mean, Pritchard couldn't get anything going. Hauser couldn't get anything going. It was just not a good showing from the bench. 3-point shooting-wise, the team didn't do too well. So many turnovers. The free throw stuff was weird. And Jason Tatum had an awful game, and yet they still only lost by a few points. So, you take it with a grain of salt. But it is concerning to me that the Nuggets have now beaten the Celtics squad twice. The Celtics won't have another chance to beat the Nuggets this year unless they meet them in the finals, which I think is looking increasingly likely. Jokic is by far the best player in the NBA. And if you don't agree, then you're just biased. There's no reason why he shouldn't be like a top 20 player by the end of his career, if not top 10, because I don't think we've never seen anyone like him who can do what he does on a basketball court. And I say okay, the Celtics don't have a way to guard him. I don't think any team in the NBA does. I think he's the most unguardable player in the NBA because he's even if you can somehow contain him scoring wise, he's such a good passer, one of the best in the NBA. So he's going to find another guy who's open. You have to really double him, and if you double him, he's going to find the open man every single time. So he is the most unstoppable force in the NBA right now. He's without a doubt the best player. So good. Reigning Finals MVP, obviously. There's no reason why they shouldn't just repeat again this year. The reason I would argue is the Boston Celtics, who hopefully would be able to stop them. And of course they have competition in the West, right? The Timberwolves and the Thunder, even though they're younger and have less playoff experience, they could still be able to give this team a run for their money. The Clippers, you never know what's going to happen with the Lakers in the playoffs. They always turn it on, so you never know. But if this Nuggets team faces the Celtics in the finals, I'm very, very, very concerned for the Celtics because we saw it. They beat them twice, once on their home floor. So it's, and that game was obviously different. It was closer at the end, and Tatum missed that shot to put them, I think it was to tie it. But yeah, I mean, it's just, what can you do? Jamal Murray was amazing. Aaron Gordon was amazing. The bench was amazing. Peyton Watson flying out the stands, sending shots. It was just a crazy good game from the whole team. And the thing is that you can, the team can come to a point where they live with Jokic making those shots, but you have to do a better job on the supporting cast. And when Jokic is on the bench, you have to win those minutes handedly. And the Celtics just didn't do that. They got outplayed when Jokic was on the bench. At some points, it felt like they were at least. Peyton Watson, like I mentioned before, had a great game. Everyone was clicking. Everyone was firing on all cylinders. Jamal Murray is really heating up as we get down to the stretch towards the playoffs. We know he's always scary in those situations. I mentioned Aaron Gordon, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They have a really, really good lineup. Michael Porter Jr. didn't even have that good of a night. But, when his shot wasn't falling, he gets other guys involved. So, really interesting game. A finals matchup between those two is what I expect, and I am very scared for the Celtics in that situation. But, of course, you need to bounce back after a tough loss like that, 2 in a row. You have to win. So they went into Footprint Center in Phoenix and beat the Suns despite a masterpiece from Kevin Durant. 45 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists on 69% shooting, 57% from 3. Absolute dominance. It didn't matter what the Celtics threw at him. Drew Holiday was putting his hand in his face. He would still make them. He would get and ones. He was just on fire last night, especially as the game continued to progress. But he did run out of gas a little bit at the end. Missed a couple shots that would have given the Suns a better chance to win the game. And the Celtics were obviously able to squeak it out. Now, the first player I'll talk about, again, Jaylen Brown. He's carried this team since the All-Star break. He really has. I don't know what's gotten into him, but he has looked unreal. He had 27 points on 10 for 21 shooting last night. He needs to lock himself into the gym and work on those free throws, obviously. That's been a real struggling point for him. But, you can't blame the guy who's scoring the most points on the loss, right? So even though he missed a couple free throws last night that would have changed the game, you can't blame him because without him, they wouldn't even be in that position. So needs to work on the free throws, but this has looked like JB's team for the past week at least. Drew Holiday, another amazing night. He was 5 for 7 from the field, 3 for 5 from 3. He had great defense as always, got some steals, made some great plays. Derek White had a better game, made all the shots from inside. He just can't connect from deep still, but he had a crazy good block. I believe it was on Royce O'Neal, and his arm bent all the way back like that, and he's looking at the ball, and he just blocks it like from there. One of the best blocks I've seen this season, definitely from Derek White, who is obviously the leader in the NBA in blocks for guards. So great stuff from him. Horford had a bad shooting night. We don't take Al Horford slander on this podcast. Even though he didn't have a good shooting night, he was really good on defense, I thought. Gave KD a couple and ones that he should have, but I mean, it's Kevin Durant. Like, you can't fault him for that. 12 rebounds, filled in well for KP, I thought. And speaking of filling in for KP, how about Luke Cornett last night? Constant lob threat. Only missed one shot the whole night, 14 points. Was getting those boards, was playing solid defense, getting blocks. Really impressed with him. I think that, Xavier Tillman has sort of lit a fire under Cornett because a lot of people are calling for Tillman to take his minutes, myself included sometimes. But Cornett proved me and a lot of other people wrong last night. I thought he had a great game. Definitely a huge part of why the Celtics were able to lock in and win. Now, I touched on Tatum a little bit. I mentioned him. Wasn't great by his standards. He said after the game, "I'm glad I have great teammates because I stunk it up tonight." I think that's being a little harsh. He wasn't as bad as the night before or 2 nights before. He was fine. Like, he had, I think it was 24 points. He was fine. It's just the turnovers really killed him yet again. 4 turnovers. They were bad too. Really struggled in that first half, but picked it up in the second half. He took more shots than in the Nuggets game by a lot. I think it was 27, but he only hit 9. So, obviously we expect better from him. Thought it was a good game for Pritchard as well. I'll mention him. I'll give him a shout out. Hauser hit 1 3, but couldn't really find his consistent stroke that he usually can. Hauser, I feel like, is so much better at home when he has the crowd behind him. So definitely going to have to use that home court advantage that the Celtics are going to have in the playoffs to their advantage. Because I feel like these guys, these guys are playing a lot better at home this year. They were undefeated for 20 games at home. So they've only lost 3 now. They're looking really good at home. So hopefully they can capitalize during that stretch. They play the Suns again this week. They'll probably have Booker back from what I'm hearing. I anticipate him being back in the next few days. But they got the Blazers and the Jazz next. Monday, Tuesday, back-to-back. Should win both by 20. Even the Jazz on the second half of the back-to-back. I won't get too cute. The Blazers one should be very easy. And the Jazz, again, even though they're coming off a back-to-back, I don't anticipate any serious problems there. I'll take the Celtics by 20 in both of those games, and we'll talk about Phoenix on Thursday. All right, let's talk about the Boston Bruins. Now, I mentioned last episode, it could be Jake Debrusk's last game. It wasn't. Last game with the Bruins, I should say. It was not. Bruins held on to Debrusk, held on to Linus Ullmark throughout the trade deadline, only made some small moves. They added Pat Maroon from the Minnesota Wild. Funny story with him, Bruins play-by-play announcer Jack Edwards actually alluded to him being fat a few years ago and had to apologize to him. So interesting to see how that dynamic will work out. And Andrew Peak, they acquired him as well, the defenseman. So these two don't really move the needle for me that much, to be honest with you. Pat Maroon is coming back from back surgery, so we don't know when he's going to be coming back. I anticipate it being before playoffs, but he doesn't really have a timetable. I could see him contributing. I mean, he's a proven winner. He's got a lot of grit, a lot of toughness, really experienced veteran. So I could see him being a really good addition for the Bruins if it does work out. But yeah, like I said, no Debrusk deal, no Ullmark deal. Bruins feeling really confident with what they have, just making some minor additions. I know I talked last episode, there was talk about maybe getting Elias Lindholm in exchange for Debrusk and a 3-team deal, but didn't work out. And by the looks of the last 2 games, front office, Don Sweeney made a good decision because Bruins rolled Maple Leafs, the exact same score that it was when they played them earlier last week, 4-1. Goals from Pasta, Geeky, Frederick, and Carlo. So really good display there, and 2 assists from Debrusk on the night that we thought it might be his last game in black and gold. It was good to see him playing well. Important win. Obviously, the 2011 Stanley Cup winning team was in the house. Most of them, that is, Big Z and Patrice Bergeron and the likes, and Marchand also honored. He's the only active player from that team that still plays with the Bruins. So good stuff from there. Jeremy Swayman looked great, 28 saves. I'm really high on Swayman this year. I've been pretty high on Swayman. I think he's looked really good. Defense was physical, and the most important part was they just limited their mistakes. So the Bruins played a clean game. Very similar result to what it was the last time they played, which I expected. I think my score prediction was 3-1, but I'll take 4-1, the exact same thing. And then they kept that momentum going against the Pittsburgh Penguins yesterday. Matinee, 3 p.m. at the Garden. The Bruins exploded after a quiet first period. It was, oh my God, they had some kid broadcast going, Big City Green Classic, I think they called it. They had a kids broadcast going on at the same time where it was like cartoon versions of the players, which I really like that networks are doing that now. I think it's really cool, and it's a good way to get kids involved, helpful for parents. Pavel Zacha, 3 points, 2 goals and an assist. Good stuff from him. And Jake Debrusk, who else? A goal and an assist. Now that he knows he's not being traded, he's playing, and he's playing well. And also Hampus Lindholm came back from his long period on the IR, 2 assists in the return. So really good stuff from there. Ullmark, 38 saves. Hello, amazing game from him. Another guy who a lot of people are saying might get traded, might be on the way out after him and Swayman had their hug after the game on Thursday. It seemed emotional. Ullmark came out after the game and said this was a very emotional trade deadline for me. I didn't know if I was still going to be here, but they held on to him. And I think it's a wise decision to hold on to him and Swayman, alternate them night by night, see who's, doing better. And they're both doing great right now, so happy for them. This is a game that makes me really happy. These actually past 2 games make me happy with what the Bruins did at the deadline, because like I've been saying this whole podcast, all episodes, they have the talent to do it. They just have to execute. Right? On paper, they have these guys that should be playing at a high level, and they played at a remarkably high level last year, albeit with Bergeron and Krejci, who retired. But still, like these guys this year, they can do it. There's no reason why they can't. And if they keep playing like this, watch out the rest of the NHL, because they're like, when they look like this, they're borderline unbeatable. So got to keep up that momentum, that confidence. No overtime losses. I think for the first time since I've recorded a pod, they didn't lose in overtime at all. Which is awesome. So, they're on the right track. Keep the guys who are talented. They showed up these last 2 games, and this is what the Bruins can be. I mean, beating up on these lowly teams, obviously, but Toronto's not even a bad team. They've got a decent record, and the Bruins beat them twice, handedly, by the same margin. So, good stuff. Blues tomorrow night at home. Again, Bruins should win that one. No problem. I expect a multi-goal win. You got to contain Pavel Buchnevich, who's had 5 goals in the past 10, and Robert Thomas is always going to be a factor, of course. But the team isn't good. They haven't been good as of late. I think 3 wins in their last 10. So I fully expect the Bruins to take care of business at home again on this continued homestand. I don't see why they can't get it done. I'll take the Bruins 4-1 in that game. So I woke up today to the news that Mac Jones has finally been traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars in return for a late round pick. Yeah, the Jones era is officially over. I'll have to get rid of my buried Mac Jones jersey in my drawer that I haven't worn since maybe the first or second game of last season. Kind of inevitable. Glad they got something in return besides just a pick swap. It's nice that they get, a full pick. Might be a little bit of an overpay from Jacksonville. But I will say, I like this move for Mac Jones. I think that he could light a fire under Trevor because he didn't have a season that lived up to his expectations last year. He's in his hometown, new system. Let's be honest, the Patriots didn't really do him any favors for the past couple of years. On the contrary, they definitely hurt him and failed to develop him the way that they should have. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mac Jones went over to Jacksonville and really turned it up and surprised a lot of people as a backup quarterback. Knock on wood, if Trevor Lawrence was to go down and Mac Jones were to step up for an extended period of time, I don't see why he wouldn't be good. I think he lost a lot of confidence in this Patriots system. They didn't give him an offensive coordinator his second year. Didn't give him any weapons throughout his entire time here. Took away his number one weapon his third year and replaced him with Juju, who ended up being a disaster on the Patriots. So I don't see why he couldn't be good and have his career be revived there as a backup. And maybe, he balls out next year as a backup if Trevor Lawrence goes down and he ends up on another team, kind of like Baker Mayfield. So we'll see how it goes. I wish him the best. I really do. I have no ill will towards Mac Jones whatsoever. I was always on his side until the bitter end because that's how I'm always going to be with any quarterback on the New England Patriots. I'm going to support them until it's over. So all the best for Mac. But now we turn to what the Patriots are going to do at quarterback because, the option that was left is, are they going to give Mac Jones a second chance? And the answer is now a resounding no, of course. So I mentioned in my first episode, much to the chagrin of many people in the comments, that if they don't take Jaden Daniels, it'll be a bust. I think Jaden Daniels is going to be really good. Teams seem to agree with me because his stock is rising. I now think that the Commanders are going to take him at second. Unfortunately, that's what I've been seeing in the mock drafts, what I've been hearing. The Commanders are also really interested in Daniels. So that leaves Drake May at 3. So, when I mentioned in my first episode that anything besides Jaden Daniels would be a failure, I meant if you had Jaden Daniels still available. If they don't have Daniels available, take May, because from all accounts, I've hated on Drake May at some points, but like I said, I'll always ride with the quarterback of the New England Patriots. Get Drake May in there, and also bring in a guy like Jacoby Brissett. I think that'd be a great idea. I talked with Colin about that in the last episode, our special guest. So you can take Jacoby Brissett, you can draft Drake May. I'd rather not take J.J. McCarthy. It seems too much of a Mac Jones-like move for me. So I will loosen up on my Jaden Daniels or bust because it might not be possible to get Jaden Daniels. But in that case, you have to take Drake May. You don't take Marvin at all. I know he's the best available player, right? He very well might be. But you need a quarterback to have success in the NFL, especially in today's league. You need a quarterback. So if you just get Marvin and you don't get anybody who can throw it to him, who can develop alongside him, you're hurting his development now. So do him a favor and put him on a team like the Cardinals, who pick 4th, where they have Kyler Murray, who's proven to be a decent quarterback in this league. The Patriots don't have a decent quarterback on their roster right now. I mean, Bailey Zappi's whatever, but he's not going to move the needle for them at all. He's not great. So you have to get someone who can throw to your weapons before you think about getting weapons, right? If you had a machine gun, you like just sitting there, it's not going to do anything for you. You need someone to actually be able to operate the weapon to be able to use it effectively. And that's exactly what it is with the quarterback and wide receiver. If you don't have anyone to utilize that wide receiver correctly, they're not going to be as successful. It's why the Chiefs keep winning Super Bowls, because they have a great quarterback. Not great wide receivers recently by any stretch of the imagination, besides Travis Kelce at tight end, of course. But Mahomes is the reason why they keep doing it. Let's not beat around the bush here. And Brady was the reason why the Patriots won those Super Bowls. And Stafford was the reason why the Rams did it in 2021. So on and so forth. Like, good quarterbacks result in good overall team play. So the Patriots need to take a quarterback because it's the most important position. Period. In all of sports, the quarterback is the most important position. So if you don't take a quarterback, especially because this is a great quarterback class, next year doesn't look as good. So take a guy now if you have the opportunity. You are picking 3rd in the draft. Take a quarterback if you don't have a quarterback. If a team doesn't have a quarterback, that should be their priority number 1 at all times. Get a quarterback, because no team has won a Super Bowl recently that I can think of, besides the Eagles with Nick Foles, and they beat the Patriots in 2018. But Nick Foles is an experienced veteran, and they had a crazy team around them. So that's the one exception to the rule that I can think of anytime in the last 20 years where a team has won a Super Bowl without a great quarterback. So pick a quarterback, don't take Marvin Harrison, and see if you can sign a guy like Calvin Ridley. See what you have with Pop Douglas. Trade for somebody maybe. I'm bummed that Jerry Jeudy went off the board yesterday. He got traded to the Cleveland Browns. I thought he would have been a good get for the Patriots, but you have to take a quarterback. It's the most important position. Now, free agency also does start tomorrow, and I am hoping for some headlines with the Patriots because, of course, they have a record amount of cap space. Just re-signed Hunter Henry, which I thought was a fantastic move. So good. He has been the guy for the Patriots. Even when things are bad, he's been the glimmer of hope. So bring back your guy that's, proven, knows this system, and can be a good tight end, because a lot of teams don't have a good tight end. So don't take that for granted. But I would love to see some moves from the Patriots going forward this week. Tyron Smith was a guy that I mentioned before, could be really solid at that left tackle position. Obviously, Trent Brown, I believe, said yesterday he's not going to come back to the Patriots. No shocker there. So you need to fill in that hole. That would be great, I think. If you could sign another running back, maybe a Zach Moss, if you're trying to go cheaper, or re-sign Zeke, whatever it's going to be. I think you could do a little bit better than Zeke, though, with the money that you have, and it's a pretty hefty running back market this year. So, see if you can scoop up somebody. You don't have to go big on somebody like Saquon, because you already have Ramondre, and, the backfield isn't the biggest area of concern right now. So, and there's a ton of other defensive options as well that I hope and think that they will go after. Christian Wilkins from Miami would be great. I'd love to have Jordan Poyer on the team, because he's from the Buffalo Bills, and I think that would drive Bills fans crazy. Justin Simmons would be a phenomenal get if the Patriots could pull that one off. Just lost Kevin Byard today, signed with the Bears, but there's a ton of good free agency options down the road this week. So I really hope the Patriots are getting super active in that, re-signing the guys that they want to keep. Onwenu, I think, is a lock to be re-signed. They have to re-sign him because the line obviously does have so many problems. Go after some more linemen. Go after some more defensive pieces. And your biggest priority is Calvin Ridley, in my opinion, because if you don't get Calvin Ridley, you're going into another season without a clear number one option at wide receiver. Calvin Ridley's a proven guy. He can get the job done for you. So that would be my priority, getting a wide receiver. I love if you get Calvin Ridley and like Hollywood Brown, I think would be a good pairing. So do your best to put everything after those guys, and then focus on Tyron Smith, re-signing Mike Onwenu, and getting some more defensive pieces. You have the money to do it. Why not? Go big or go home. Gerard Mayo's first year. Let's try to put together a roster that can actually compete. The last thing I want to talk about in regards to the Patriots is the last two episodes that came out of The Dynasty, which I thought were the best episodes so far. The first one was on Deflategate, the whole controversy where obviously against the Indianapolis Colts, it was found that the footballs for the Patriots in this was the AFC Championship were underinflated by about 2 pounds. And they talk about Brady's journey through that. My take on it, on Deflategate as a whole, is yes, Brady probably had something to do with it. And I know that's not a popular opinion here in these parts, but even from his interview, I feel like he would have been more clear about, adamant as saying like it wasn't me. I don't think he did it himself, but they talk about the footage where the ball boys bring the balls into the bathroom for 90 seconds and then come out with them. Why didn't you leave them outside? Why'd they bring them in? And Brady's friend, not friend, he was a ball boy, I think, whose name was the Deflator. And they referred to him as the Deflator. I know it could be a nickname for something else, but yeah, that's kind of like a smoking gun. So I think that's why Brady was, suspended, because of that Wells report. It obviously was, but to me, that evidence seems pretty damning. So I definitely think Brady knew something. I don't think he did it himself, but I think he knew something. But again, and they mentioned this in the documentary, quarterbacks, they talk about quarterbacks running their football through the washing machine. Like, people, have their things with these footballs, and I don't think it's that big of a deal that they were deflated. Like, that's not why they beat the Colts. They would have beaten the Colts anyway, and guess what happened 2 weeks later? Footballs were all properly inflated, and they defeated the Seahawks in that Super Bowl. And guess what happened 2 years later? Well, they talk about it in the next episode, that comeback against the Atlanta Falcons, the greatest game I've ever witnessed in sports history. My favorite moment, that will always be burned into my memory, me watching that game, because it was so incredible. And being able to take a dive down memory lane through that game, so good. If you haven't been watching the show, you got to tune in. It's so good. It's so eye-opening. So all respect to the show. Besides, one thing that I've seen a lot of people complaining about is their portrayal of Belichick as the villain, despite winning 6 Super Bowls and always like he should be regarded as the greatest coach of all time. But I do have a but here. The thing with Belichick is that if this stuff is true about him constantly trying to get Brady out the door, showing Kraft statistics about Brady's performance, declining and, trying to get a new guy in, always planning for the future. I understand it to an extent, but he was wrong. Let's be honest, he was wrong. And the Patriots dynasty would have had so much more of a, ribbon ending if Brady was able to win that 7th ring with the Pats instead of the Bucs, and Brady was able to retire a Patriot. They've sort of mended that now. They had the ceremony where he came back at the beginning of this season, announced that he's going to be expedited into the Patriots Hall of Fame. But how much nicer would it have been if Brady got that 7th ring with New England? He could have done it. Like, New England was just as good as Tampa, in my opinion. He obviously had more weapons with Tampa, but the defense with New England was just as good. New England could have easily gotten out and got those weapons and said, we're going to give you what you need, Tom, because of everything you've done for us. We're going to try to get you going out of here on a high note. But they didn't do it. So Belichick, in my mind, will always have some hint of a villain arc because of how he pushed Brady out the door. I think Brady did much more for this dynasty than Belichick did. I don't think that's a controversial take. I think that debate is long over. We saw how Belichick performed when Brady left. I give Brady a lot more credit, and I think it would have meant a lot to the fans to see Brady retire in a Patriots uniform rather than a Buccaneers uniform. But it is unfair to portray Belichick as the sole villain, as this soulless guy who doesn't care about his team, who only cares about winning. There are some elements of that. He is a very win-driven guy. He's a success-motivated guy. He's always got a chip on his shoulder. But then they show these clips where he's getting along really well with the players, and he's celebrating with them after wins. So I think they're definitely doing a little bit too much there. NFL Films actually came out yesterday and said that they're distancing themselves from the project because they don't like how Belichick is being portrayed. I think it's a little bit overboard. But like I said, part of it I get because he did push Brady out the door, and it is what it is. But you can't just look back at Belichick and think he was a total villain and a failure, and because he is a large part of the reason why the Patriots were so successful. So obviously this has been a very positive, for the most part, podcast. Celtics, they won last night. They didn't go on their first 3-game losing streak. The Bruins are rolling. The Patriots have moved on from Mac Jones. It's a bright horizon with a new quarterback, a new young guy. But let's talk about the negative, which is the New England Revolution. Brutal loss last night in Atlanta. 0-3 for the first time since 2001. That was the year I was born. I think this happened before I was even born. So, obviously, not good stuff. You expect better. Ravas and Vrioni, who I've ragged on this whole podcast, were poor. The team needs to make some additions or changes to try to ensure that this doesn't happen again. They're obviously going to lose again, but they can't go on this brutal streak where Carles Hill is the only guy scoring goals. He scored 1 in the first match against Toronto and 1 in this match against Atlanta, but it was too late in both. The Toronto one he tied the game, but they rattled back and scored 2. So bad showing overall. The first goal was poor from Ravas. He came out too late, gave away a penalty. I have no faith in him ever saving a penalty. He was sent the wrong way both times. Second goal in the second half was very questionable. They called Nick Lima for a handball, but his hand is right at his side. So as far as I know, in the Premier League, which should be considered the standard for the sport, they would never call that a handball. So that's incredibly questionable. The next 2 goals, fair play by Atlanta. Carles Hill, an absolute beauty. The 2 goals that he scored, which ended up being consolation goals this season so far, have been great. The Revs haven't scored any bad goals. It's been 2 beautiful curlers by Carles Hill. The first one was obviously better and one of the best goals you'll see all season, to be honest. But Thiago Almada, I mentioned him in the last episode. Too much to handle. He had a great game. The whole team really just overpowered him. And there was a ton of fans. I think they said it was 70,000 fans in that stadium rooting on their team. Too much for the Revs to overcome. They got to make Cincinnati pay when they come to their house, to Gillette Stadium, this next Sunday. I'm going to preview that game a lot more as it comes closer. This Thursday, this coming Thursday, I'll talk a lot more about it. But for now, this just isn't good. I know they need time to figure things out with a new manager. I know they have the talent. They should be better than they are, which is why I would advise people listening now and people who are, feeling somber about the Revs, I wouldn't give up hope just yet. I think they can very easily bounce back from this. They have the talent to do it. They have the leadership. Carlos Hill, when he re-signed with the New England Revolution, said, I want to be here. This is the place for me. So I would fully expect him to be able to have some bounce-back performances coming up. I mean, not even bounce back, because he's the guy who's been scoring. I would expect him to inspire his team to have bounce back performances, because we've seen the way that they can play, albeit against lower competition in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which they're obviously going to sail by this week. They have a 4-0 lead on aggregate as they head to Costa Rica. So I would say stick with them, because they do have the pieces. They have these young guys, Bayraktarovic, Buck, that are getting older, Harks even, that are going to continue to improve. The defense, even though they didn't really show it last night, they kind of did show that they are actually pretty good. Once you're down 2-0, it's tough to stay disciplined, and they didn't really stay disciplined. But you're pushing forward. You're trying to get back in the game, so I don't blame them for that. What I will credit the defense for is that for that first half, because they scored the goal right in stoppage time. For that first half, when it was still 0-0, the defense was playing remarkably, I thought. I think they have something here. I really do. And even though the record doesn't show that, I would really advise you to stick with this team, because I think they can be so much better. They just need to get that first win under their belt, and then I think they'll start rolling. Hopefully we can see another homestand where the Revs were undefeated at home for so long last year. They obviously aren't going to get that this year, because they did drop their home opener to Toronto, but I think they can be good. So I will look in the camera and say this: stick with the Revs. They have the talent. They have the pieces to do this. They have a coach who is proven to be able to win at high levels in Caleb Porter. So stick with them. They can do this. They just have to iron out the wrinkles. And if they can make some moves, bring in a new striker, bring in a new goalie maybe, they'll be even more poised for success. So I would highly encourage them to do that, because this Revs team, I think, can actually be really good. Red Sox, nothing quite anything new there. Spring training still going on, so I won't waste any time on them today, but getting excited for that season. As the weather improves, we still await baseball season. So that's actually all I have for today. Thank you guys so much, as always, for tuning in to Titletown Talk. I'm your host, Jackson Tolliver. I'll see you next Thursday. Peace.